So I guess I'd like to start with, I'll just let you introduce yourselves and kind of a bit more about your organisations. I know we were speaking at dinner last night and a lot of people don't know what you guys do, so let's let people know what you do to give some context.
Hello, lovely to be here and lovely to see so many of you. My name's India and I'm Senior Marketing and Communications Manager at Football Beyond Borders. Football Beyond Borders are a social and educational charity. Essentially what we are, the unsexy way of putting it is we're an alternative provision, but it's much more complex than that. What we do and our mission is to ensure that every young person in the UK has a trusted adult throughout their school years and that they finish school with the skills and grades that they need to succeed as adults. And we use football as a hook because, pardon the pun, it levels the playing field between young people and gives them the opportunity to develop the social and emotional learning skills that they need to succeed in later life.
Hi everyone, I'm Jamilah. I work at the Diana Award. We are also a youth-based charity where we have multiple programs where we go into schools to develop and support young people in anti-bullying, mentoring and social action. We also have a Diana Award, which is awarded to young people globally, and it's an accolade to support them and acknowledge their social action projects around the world. I'm the Marketing Partnerships Manager, so I look after partnership campaigns, social media, email, a bit of everything at the moment. It's just my manager and I, so we're wearing multiple hats, as you do in a small charity space.
Thank you, both of you, and I'm sure everyone will agree, two people working day in, day out in youth marketing, so who better to have here, really? So, India, just to come to you first. Obviously, in my opening, I mentioned kind of, especially with youth audiences, there's a lot of intersectionality. It's a very complex audience to engage with, especially when we talk about youth, ethnic minority audiences. How are young people identifying themselves as well, because I think that's an interesting point, and how layered is that, do you feel?
It's incredibly layered and it's incredibly complex, and I think, we work with about 3,000 young people throughout the UK. We work in London, the West Midlands and the North West, and what we see amongst young people is the way that they experience identity is multi-layered by nature, and they are very hyper-aware of that fact as well. Some of the content that we publish, and the most successful of the content we publish, is the stuff that focuses on their hyper-local identity. So, for example, like, where are the best places to eat in Basildon? That's the stuff that goes viral on TikTok. And it's because we're creating a space for them to see that, like, hyper-local culture being reflected online. But that being said, they also experience their identity at a community level within their school, within their FBB groups, at a national level, understanding like their city and where that sits within the UK. And then on a global level, like 60% of the young people that we work with come from the global majority. And we build into our curriculum an awareness and appreciation of that, because we know that all of those identities are actually equally important to our young people, and it's important for that to be reflected to them. It's an essential part of developing their social and emotional learning skills, that they see us making space for all of those identities in equal parts.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess ultimately the point is they are not only thinking about their own identity, but also others' identity and how that is included as well. And then, Jamilah, when we look at the Diana Awards, what does inclusion mean in practice for you in every day? What does that look like?
So at the Diana Award, one of our missions and our values is to empower young people to change the world. Earlier this year, we released a youth charter, which is on our website that you can access. And it's all about being a best practice guide for organisations who want to get involved with youth work. So whether you already work with young people or you want to work with young people, I guess as the experts in that, because we work with a lot of young people across the years, we've put together a guide that has a lot of points and advice on how you can actively include young people and make sure that the experience for them is beneficial to both you as the organisation and to the young person. So we want to add value to those experiences to the young people and remove those barriers to working with them to ensure that they're actively represented in the work that we're doing for them.
Yeah. And I guess ultimately, in engaging with youth audiences, we often see brands kind of overly lean to trends and things like this, like basically what's happening on TikTok at the moment, is that how I can get in with a youth audience? And that often misses what matters. So what is it that you believe is what matters about engaging youth audiences?
I think trends are good for visibility if you want to go viral, and if it relates to your brand and your audiences, then it's great, but it's just the language. It's understanding the identity, that's the story. And I've seen a lot of brands just jumping on trends because it's what everyone's talking about. And as you mentioned earlier, young people are very quick to call that out. And then if they see that, it makes them lose brand loyalty. So when you're jumping on trends, you have to make sure that it actually relates to your organisation. Otherwise, you'll just fall flat on your face.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. And I guess ultimately we're making this feel a little bit more scary about how to engage with Gen Z audiences. So hopefully some of the other bits help as well. Although useful guide again mentioned there by Jamilah. So India as well, when we look at using sports and community places, and I guess this question is specifically for you, but also from a broader perspective, you use sports and community spaces to engage with youth audiences. But what's the importance of that? And I guess if you then look at that from a broader perspective, is the importance of sports places still the same answer, essentially, when we look at other spaces that youth audiences exist in?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one. So FBB, a few years ago, we actually built a community cage. Our HQ in London is embedded in a little estate called Angeltown in Brixton. And one of the issues that we as an organisation recognise is there's a really endemic issue in terms of access to things like community cages and pitches and sporting facilities around the UK, and the communities and the young people that most desperately need them often can't afford to participate in them. Cages are very rarely free. And it was really important for us, if we're embedded in a community, we're not necessarily all from there, we're from all over London, but we exist in that space, and it was important for us to actually create an accessible, free space for the young people that exist in the estate around us to come and participate in. And cages and pitches are an amazing space because they, like I said before, they level the playing field. They're a space where you get kids from all different kinds of backgrounds who come together for a kickabout after school or at the weekend. And they don't necessarily care where the other kids come from, what schools they go to. So they're essential to the social fabric of this country, but they're swiftly diminishing. They're not kept very well. There's no investment. And like when it comes to brands and what they could be doing, and I think one of the really beautiful things about like the partnerships that we have with brands at FBB is if we turn round to a Nike, say, and say like one of the most meaningful things that you can do in West Walsall is set up a community pitch. They listen because we are so actively in touch with young people. And when it comes to community centres and sporting spaces, they are an essential lifeline for a lot of the young people that we work with. The kids that we work with, like I say, over-index massively in the global majority. They also massively represent kids who are eligible for free school meals and kids that have SEN. And all of these kids tend to be the ones that need community centres, after school clubs, because their parents will often be juggling multiple jobs, and so they don't necessarily have the same facilities that other young people do. So yeah, in terms of community spaces and sporting facilities, they are essential, and I really wish more brands paid attention to the need, because it's such an easy way for them to show up and give space.
Yeah, and I guess there's a really interesting point to kind of pull almost the marketing point out of there as well, is the reason why you're able, through those spaces, to create a meaningful space for them is because they feel safe, and they feel like if Nike sponsor a pitch, well, then Nike themselves from that are taking that kind of trust in the space and that comfortability in the space as well, and really kind of usefully embedding themselves in something that's meaningful to that audience as well, which is really interesting. And Jamilah, obviously the focus for where you work is obviously around apprenticeships, and obviously we heard Edna talking about the need, especially in Marcoms, for better representation across teams, specifically senior leaders. Edna was talking about, obviously yours is apprenticeships. I guess, what's the importance of that for you? And then equally, to go on Thomas's point of making sure people have something to take away as well, what do you think there's one barrier that people can use to remove to make it easier to access for young people as well?
Really good question. I was an apprentice myself, so I'm a huge advocate for them. I think it's a really good way to get early talent in the door. I don't think if I didn't do an apprenticeship, I probably wouldn't be sat here with a manager role at 25, purely because I was able to get the 3 years of experience whilst my peers were at university, getting the theory and the knowledge, which is also really valuable. But when I joined the Diana Award, I was working alongside my colleague, and we were on the same level. The only difference was I had the 3 years of experience as an apprentice in the marketing industry, and he had a marketing degree, so they're equally as valuable as each other. But I think for learners like me who are more practical and hands-on, apprenticeships are the better route for getting that industry experience. And at the Diana Award, we also have a mentoring program where we support young people who are at risk of not being in education, employment, or training once they leave school. And we partner with volunteer mentors across multiple industries to give them the knowledge and the understanding of the opportunities out there across the industries. And I think that's also a really great way to give them access to that, because they might not have known about marketing, or they might not have known about finance, for example, but by speaking to those industry professionals, they're able to get the understanding of what they could go for career-wise once they leave school. So I think entry-level talent are very valuable because they can bring that opposing voice, they can bring the diversity to the workforce, and also by adapting to apprenticeship schemes and mentoring schemes, you're opening the door for them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess Gen Z are also a very value-led audience, we know that, and we've already said kind of if they see something that's inauthentic, they will call you out, and they will make it heard and make it known. India, when you look at the youth spaces that you spoke about, obviously again kind of thinking this in both the youth spaces that you provide, but then also kind of how we're making this relevant for marketing as well. What do you feel builds trust with youth audiences, and what do you think breaks it as well on the other side of the coin?
I'm so glad you asked. Well, trusted adults is everything that FBB is about. Trust is a huge central part of how we interact with young people. Consistency is a huge part of that. If you break consistency, you break trust. So, for example, like with our TikTok that we started only a couple of years ago now, we've already grown it. I work with a very talented man, Grant, who's our content lead, who's grown it to 40,000 followers in a very short space of time. And that's because we've consistently created a space where we only publish lo-fi content that is led by our young people. So we consistently pass them the mic, and they trust that that space will be a space where they see themselves reflected in a way that's true and authentic to how they exist in their day-to-day. And like when we think about campaigns, and when I'm actually like plotting out our campaigns for the year, listening more than speaking is a huge part of building that trust. I hope that the young people that I work with trust that when I come to them with a campaign idea, I will first listen to what they actually want from it before implementing anything. And co-creation is a huge part of that, actually actively getting them to participate in how we build out our campaigns, so that they can see when the campaign is activated not only that it reflects their thoughts and feelings about something, but it creates a space where they actually belong because they've been a part of the process.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it goes to a lot of what we heard from the first talk as well about listening to your audience is the most important thing. I always, when we have these conversations, I always think about something that my nan used to say to me, is you've got one of these and two of these. So that's always the motto that I go by. Jamilah, when organisations are kind of looking to involve young people, how do we get serious about access? Because I think that's one of the most important things that India mentioned with access to spaces, but also I guess there are barriers that are created for young people, and I think those are particularly, if you look at the stats, where's my stats man, Sam gone? If you look at young minority ethnic audiences as well, those barriers are greater. How do we kind of allow that better access?
So I think awareness is saying the right words and access is creating the right opportunities. So as I mentioned before, apprenticeships and mentoring opportunities are great for those entry-level access and getting younger people into the workforce. Also encourage your current workforce to get involved in volunteering. So quick plug, of course, the Diana Ward Mentoring Programme will be recruiting for new mentors on the 3rd of November. So if you want to get involved with supporting young communities and getting them into your workforce, then there'll be a lot on our social media and on our website about the applications. Feel free to come and talk to me after if you want to find out more information. Also give young people the decision power. So as India mentioned, we also work a lot with young people when we're building campaigns. So right from the beginning, when we're building out the general idea, all the way up to the post-production and the promotion, we try and involve young people at every stage of the campaign decision-making to make sure that we're accurately representing them in the work that we do. And every time I do work with young people, whether it's for a focus group or a workshop, they're always very grateful for the opportunity, and I can see them grow in so much confidence because we're asking them the right questions and we're asking them to get involved. And I guess they're not really used to that opportunity because they're able to see the impact once the campaign is launched. They're able to say, yeah, I did work on that, or yeah, I did give my opinion on this and that. So I think giving them decision-making power is really impactful for not only us, but also empowering them to make decisions. And I did write this down, I have my notes, because I thought it was quite a good line. But young people want a seat, and access is how you pull up the chair to the table for them to have a seat at that table.
Very nice. And then I guess ultimately I want to look at some examples of what's working today as well. So India, have you got an example in FBB of something that's landed well? And have you seen a campaign succeed through co-creation? You've mentioned co-creation is really important. Jamilah, also there, you've mentioned kind of listening to young people as well is really important.
Yeah, I'll mention two different campaigns that hinge on kind of two different programs. We have a boys' program and a girls' program. And one of the modules that we have in our boys' program is called FC Futures. It's sponsored by EA Sports. And that entirely hinges on co-creation. With all of our curriculum modules, we have something called public product. Public product is something that our young people will produce at the end of a module. It helps give their learning purpose, that they feel like they're building to something, and it's FBB's prerogative to give that public product a platform, whether that's online, whether that's in a space that a partner can create. And with FC Futures, that's an 8-week module, which basically helps young people understand the power of football and the way it relates to various social issues, whether that is racial justice, mental health, education and beyond. And the public product that our young people got to create at the end of that module, they actually got to competitively design boots that now feature in FC24. The cultural currency that had with our young people is invaluable because they can literally see, and there are thousands of people internationally that play that game that can select the FBB boot now. And like that just makes that module so much more inspiring for those young people. With our girls program, we had a campaign around the Women's Euros this summer called This Is My Pitch. And that was giving young girls the opportunity to create their pitches for what they wanted to see in the future of women's football. So we recognise that women's football is an area that's entirely uninvested in. Girls don't get the same opportunities as boys at a grassroots level. So we actively created a space for them that said, you are seen and we want to know your thoughts, feelings and opinions on this. And the outcome of us doing that, and that was entirely self-funded on our part, the outcome of that is we're now having conversations with the WSL who want to bring our girls who created those pitches in our tiny little office in Brixton on an afternoon, eating crisps and drinking Coke, and they're now being invited to the WSL offices to deliver those pitches to a room of women who are actually the architects of the future of women's football. So the value of that is incalculable, and that all hinges around co-creation, and that all hinges around actively seeking young people throughout that process of campaign building.
Yeah, really interesting. As Thomas mentioned, we're coming to the end of the session, so as always, we want you to leave with one thing from each of our speakers to take away as well. From me, just to give you the highlights of this conversation is obviously, I think, co-creation is really important, is what we've seen come out. And again, it's a similar theme to what we heard from the guys in the first talk, is it's listening more than you talk as well. But yeah, I guess, guys, one piece of advice you give, you do this day in, day out, engaging with youth audiences, these people might not. What's one piece of advice we could give each of them?
Oh, it's very broad. I think, as I mentioned before, consider when and where you're involving young people, whether that's in a campaign, in a project, or if you just want to get their opinion about a social media post that's going out. Young people will be able to tell you what would work for them and what wouldn't. So if you are, say, putting out that social media post aimed at young people, they'll be able to say, yeah, that will actively engage young people, or it won't. So make sure you're involving them in the conversations, invite them to sit at the table with the decision makers, not only with marketing teams, but try and get them involved and in front of senior leadership teams as well, to show them that you are inclusive as an organisation, but that you also value their opinion at every single level within the organisation.
Yeah, I think very similarly from me. It's obviously almost impossible to survey an audience of young people that are under the age of 16. So if you can't survey them, work with organisations who can give you that access, because there are plenty, like FBB, who are more than happy to work with you on that, but also think about how you can make that process of gathering that data and gaining that value for your brand. What's the return on investment for the young people involved? It shouldn't be a one-way street, and how can you make that process of value to those young people as well, because even little things like that outside of campaigns, if that young person has had that experience with your brand, they will hold you in higher esteem because they will regard you as a brand that has actually given credence to their voice and to their opinion.
Lovely. Can I have a hand for my second talk there?